Let me welcome all of you to our Washington News Conference today. We appreciate your joining us. I'll be glad to take your questions about the legislative agenda and what we're doing in the United States Senate. You know that we've been working very hard to prepare for this session. We've had a series of working groups appointed to come up with the exact language for legislation on a number of priority issues that we talked about in the campaign, and now we're delivering on that promise. The first item of business here in the Senate is putting the Congress under the same rules and laws that everyone else lives under. That's the legislation we're debating today in the Senate. We hope to get early passage next week. I'll be glad to talk about that or anything else you'd like to discuss with me. Let's call on first Kip Smith in Jackson.
Good morning, sir. How you doing?
Fine, thanks.
Quick question this morning. Is it feasible to believe that the Congress can work with the federal establishment, with the Democratic president in office? Is that a feasible plan that they will see eye to eye on certain issues like welfare, things of that nature, and on a plan that can suit all of American citizens?
I think we're off to a good start. I think the administration already is realizing that we have to cut the costs of government. That means not only the Congress, where we're cutting $200 million out of the operation of the Congress, but out of the executive branch as well. We're hearing the President talk about maybe eliminating a department of government and other agencies. We are encouraged by that. We hope that we can agree on how to cut the cost of government, make it more efficient, make it respond to the legitimate needs of the people. We think the federal government has taken on too much and that more responsibility and authority ought to be shared by local and state governments, and that's what we're working to achieve. Melvin Carlock in Tupelo.
Good morning, Senator. USDA announced a plan, I believe yesterday, that would take away, food stamp uses from stores. What is that going to do, as far as the impact to smaller business? A lot of those stores were set up, with the intention of doing a lot of food stamp business. What kind of problems do you foresee with that?
This is an effort, I think, to deal with fraud and the misuse and abuse of the food stamp program. We do want it to work so that those who truly need help from the government to meet their nutrition needs can get that help. And we want to make it so that it's easy to use, it's simple, but we don't want it abused. And there's been too much abuse in this program, and so efforts are being made to tighten it up. Those who are taking food stamps for things that are for items other than food are also being put on notice that not only are they going to be cut off from eligibility to participate in the program, but they're going to be prosecuted as well. Brett Austin in Biloxi.
Yes, Senator. The filibuster is something that's become used more and more over the past few years. Do you expect the Democrats, while in the minority, to continue to use the filibuster as a tactic to stop legislation?
I don't think it's going to be just the Democrats who are going to want to talk about issues maybe longer than you might normally expect would be required. But the filibuster rule in the Senate is not just to give people an opportunity to obstruct or hold up things in a mischievous, partisan way. But I can remember just a few years ago, we had a senator who offered an amendment to a bill that would have given a legal preference to the Great Lakes ports for shipping of foodstuffs and agriculture commodities to overseas recipients. And this would have hurt the Gulf Coast ports, those in Mississippi, Texas, and Alabama, because it would have given a legal preference to the Great Lakes ports, whereas we would have gotten more business if that preference hadn't been granted. I recall that we had to threaten to hold up action on the Senate for a long period of time on that legislation until we got an assurance that all port ranges, all areas of the country would be treated fairly under this rule. Now that was a legitimate and appropriate use, in my view, of the threat of unlimited debate. So this rule protects, in many cases, the rights of regions, of certain individual states, particularly small states. So I'm opposed to trying to change this rule so that you create another House of Representatives in the Senate so that everything is taken up on a strict rule and debated just a few minutes and passed. The Senate is supposed to give careful consideration to these issues, and I think that's one of the reasons why we can be assured that nothing's going to be hastily adopted by this Congress, because the Senate's here to ensure that it's going to be given careful and thorough consideration before it's adopted.
Okay, one quick follow-up. House is on kind of a 100-day schedule with their contract with America. How about the Senate, though? Where do you expect to be in about 100 days?
We're going to take up everything the House passes, and we're going to review it very carefully and in a timely way. I don't think we're going to tie ourselves to any kind of strict schedule to have something done by a certain date. We want to be sure that the quality of the work is such that the American people will be satisfied that it's in their interests and that we've considered it carefully. I know that's the obligation of the Senate under the Constitution, and we're going to be sure that we discharge that constitutional responsibility.
Thank you.
Let's go now to Jeff Rent in Greenville.
Good morning, Senator.
Hi.
Wanted to know, welfare reform is a hot topic, and here in Washington, the Work First pilot program will be trying to put people on welfare back to work. What type of legislation will be coming up that is going to try to do this across the nation?
It is obvious to me that welfare reform is an issue whose time has come, and I think the centerpiece of the welfare reform initiative Congress will pass will be to give the state and local governments more flexibility, more authority to design a program that meets their individual needs. Mississippi's new program is a good example of something that I think should be given a chance to work by the federal government. Mississippi had to come to Washington and get special permission from the Department of Health and Human Services, the Department of Labor, the Department of Agriculture before they could institute this program, and it delayed the implementation of it for months and months. I think that kind of foot-dragging and impediment to innovation in Washington has to change, and that's what we want to change in a federal welfare reform program.
Okay, thank you.
Dave Laval in Meridian.
Just two questions I'd like to ask you, sir. There's been a push lately on the local and state levels to impose term limits, but not at the national level. But the Republicans believe that you do need term limits for members of Congress. Why is that?
There are differences of opinion about it, and frankly, I think the jury is still out on whether or not there can be a state action taken to change the constitutional eligibility for service in Congress. The Supreme Court has that under review now in a case coming from the state of Arkansas, and we'll know later this year whether that kind of action at the state level is all that's required. It may require a constitutional amendment. The fact is that term limits already apply to members of Congress. A House member can serve only 2 years before he's up for re-election. And so the people have the right to throw out a member of Congress after 2 years and a senator after 6 years. It may be that the Congress will decide to change the eligibility and prohibit members from serving for any specific period of time, like 12 years in either house. And if that's the decision the people of Mississippi want to make, they're free to make it at every election.
Do you believe that term limits are necessary for members of Congress?
I don't think it's really necessary, in that you've seen huge turnovers here in the House and the Senate in recent years. Members are serving shorter terms, fewer members are trying to make a career out of politics, and I think it's probably a problem that's already solving itself through the actions of the people when they go to vote on Election Day.
And just one quick other question, sir. I understand that today's a pretty historic day for you. It's been a long time since you've been able to chair or sit in the president's seat of the Senate. Could you talk about that, please?
Well, it's interesting that with the majority now in the hands of Republicans, we're seeing the presiding officer's duty handled by only Republican senators now. And I know when we were in the majority for 6 years, I was given an award for presiding over the Senate for 100 hours during 1 year by Vice President then George Bush. I hope I don't have to preside that much over this session of Congress, because other duties will probably require my closer attention. But it is a responsibility that we welcome, and we hope that we do it in a way that reflects credit on Mississippi and the U.S. Senate.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. We have time now for a follow-up. If anyone wants to do a follow-up question, anybody with another question? If,
Yes, sir, I'm going to ask one more question.
Okay.
It's been 3 weeks since you and the Chief of Naval Operations toured NAS Meridian. Are you hearing anything in terms of where the air station stands in terms of base closure?
I will be either later this week or next week. I had a call from the Chief of Naval Operations office indicating that he wanted to visit with me, and I expect to have that meeting soon. As soon as we do have that meeting, I'll be able to give you an update. But I haven't heard anything from him since we had that meeting. Let me say that that was a very worthwhile effort, though. The Chief of Naval Operations was very impressed with Meridian, and I don't know what's going to come of the Base Closure Commission process, but I do know that he was impressed. The officers and men and women at that Naval Air Station impressed him with the way they went about their work and the good job that was being done in Meridian. I was really proud of Meridian that day. The Senator from Arkansas.
Mr. President, I had not planned to speak this afternoon. I certainly don't want to be a part of...
The Senator from Nebraska.
Mr. President, I certainly thank my colleague and friend from...
Is there objection to the request? Without objection, it is so ordered.
My question is this. May I say to the distinguished senator?